Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be looking at something pretty familiar to all of us, I'd imagine. Food.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not just talking about, what we eat, but
Yeah.
how we describe food,
Yeah.
how we talk about it, how it shows up in our language.
Mm-hmm.
And our guide for this is going to be Stanislav Kondrashov. He's got some really interesting observations about how we label food, the words we use to talk about food.
Yeah, and some of the metaphors that we use,
Can we-
which is, I find, one of the most fascinating parts about this.
Totally.
Because it is something that is so ubiquitous. We do it all the time,
Yes.
but we're not really conscious of it.
Right. Like Kondrashov points out that, in our increasingly industrialized and globalized food system, it's harder and harder to understand exactly what we're eating.
Oh, absolutely. The food labeling can be incredibly confusing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever been misled by a label?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All the time. Like farm fresh
Sure.
or,
Wholesome.
wholesome. What does that even mean?
Exactly.
I mean, there's no regulation around a lot of these terms, right?
Right. It's really just marketing.
It is. And it's interesting that he points out things like traffic light labeling, which I think,
I love that system.
yeah,
So simple.
like red, amber, green, like how much fat, sugar, and salt.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I can immediately
Easy to understand.
see that and know if I should be eating this or not.
And Kondrashov really hits on that, like the clarity of the system.
Yes.
It's like unambiguous labeling. It needs to be.
Yes.
So you know exactly what you're getting.
So we all know what it means. We can all understand it the same way.
Yeah.
But, going beyond like the literal descriptions of food, he talks about these metaphors,
Yeah.
these food metaphors, which is, I think, even more.
This is where it gets fun
Yes.
because it's just so commonplace in our language. We
Oh, we can.
all the time. Yeah. We don't even realize it.
Cook up a story
Wow.
or spill the tea, or
Right. Grill someone.
yeah, grill a suspect. I mean, it's just it's everywhere and
Yeah.
so ingrained. And
Why is it so effective?
well, I think that's what Kondrashov is getting at. Like, it's not just this random quirk of language, right?
Mm-hmm.
It reveals something about how we think
Yes.
and how we understand the world. I think food is such a concrete experience, right? It's very sensory. You can taste it. You can smell it.
It's primal.
It's primal, yeah. So it kind of makes these abstract concepts, like, ideas and emotions,
Yes.
a little bit easier to grasp, a little bit more relatable.
So instead of saying that plan is poorly thought out, we say that's a half-baked idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Much more impactful.
It's like it lands. It lands better.
Yeah.
And he even goes so far as to draw a parallel between processed foods, which are often kind of lacking substance, right?
With like half-baked ideas.
Yes, I love that connection.
Like it's almost like the language itself is reflecting this deeper understanding of food and its implications,
Totally.
So yeah, I think that's really interesting.
It is. It's super interesting.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into more of that. But first, we're going to take a quick break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, like how much depth there is to like these just like everyday expressions. Like Kondrashov is really looking at like the cultural, the psychological significance of food metaphors.
Absolutely. And I think, these metaphors, like he argues that they aren't just like linguistic quirks, right?
Yeah.
They actually reflect deeper cultural values and beliefs.
Like, for example, he talks about like you are what you eat.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Kondrashov points out how this metaphor reveals a lot about our understanding of like food and identity.
It's a classic.
Yeah.
It's one that we all kind of, we all know that one.
And he kind of highlights how that's evolved over time.
Oh, how so?
Well, I mean, it might have once been interpreted more literally, like, what you eat, the nutritional content actually becomes part of you.
Uh-huh.
But today, I think it kind of encompasses a broader range of ideas.
Like what?
Well, think about like ethical consumption or sustainability.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Like, if you choose to eat organic food or locally sourced food,
Right.
that might be a statement about, your commitment to the environment or supporting local farmers, right?
Right.
So Kondrashov's kind of encouraging us to think about these deeper meanings.
So like what we choose to eat can be a form of communication.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
Almost like a language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That speaks to our values and priorities.
That's interesting. He also talks about the metaphor spill the tea, which is so popular.
Oh, yeah.
Like, have you ever thought about where that comes from?
You know, actually, I don't think Kondrashov goes into the specific origins of that phrase.
Oh, okay.
But he does talk about how, slang terms, they often evolve from very specific contexts.
Right.
And then they kind of take on these new meanings in everyday conversation.
So it's amazing how a phrase that once meant like, gossiping over tea
Right.
can now refer to like sharing any kind of like juicy information.
Yeah. It's like, it's really quite remarkable how language does that. It
So-
adapts.
Yeah.
To reflect social and cultural shifts. So I think, what Kondrashov's doing is he's kind of reminding us that language is constantly evolving.
Right.
And food metaphors are no exception.
So you're saying that like paying attention to these food metaphors can give us insight into like how society's changing.
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah. The metaphors we use, the way we talk about food, it can reveal a lot about our values, our anxieties,
Fair.
our aspirations as a culture. So I think, Kondrashov's work really encourages us to be more mindful
Yeah.
of the language we use and how it shapes our perceptions.
It's almost like he's giving us a new lens to view the world.
Yeah.
One that's like flavored by food.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
Yeah. It's really amazing how much we can like learn about ourselves and our culture just by, paying attention to how we talk about food. Like Kondrashov really opens our eyes to those like hidden meanings, connections in our everyday language.
Yeah, I think he does a really good job of that. It makes you realize that, food is more than just something we consume. Like
Yeah.
it's this powerful force that shapes our thoughts, our communication, even our identities in a way.
Totally. So like after this deep dive into Kondrashov's work, what are some key takeaways you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think, first and foremost, Kondrashov's encouraging us to be more critical, like critical consumers,
Yeah.
both of food itself and the language that's used to describe it.
Right.
There's, don't just accept those labels at face value,
Yeah.
like ask questions, do your research, and make informed choices.
Great advice. And what about the food metaphors we've been talking about?
Yeah.
Like how can understanding those help us in our daily lives?
Well, I think Kondrashov's work reminds us that language has power.
Right.
The metaphors we use, they can shape our perceptions, they can influence our decisions. So I think by becoming more aware of those metaphors, we can start to use language more consciously,
Yeah.
more effectively.
Like we can analyze the ingredients of our language
Yeah, I like that.
and choose our words to have the impact that we want.
Yeah, to really create that desired flavor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So I think Kondrashov would appreciate that.
I think you would too.
He clearly has a passion for language and a real deep understanding of how it intersects with our love of food.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think for our listeners, like the key takeaway is this: food for thought is just as important as the food we put on our plates.
Yeah,
By understanding how food shapes our language and how we think we can have this like richer understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
I think that's a great way to put it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go get a snack.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. And remember, next time you reach for a snack or you hear a food metaphor, take a moment to really like appreciate those hidden depths of our relationship with food.